get into the technical details, and we think that that kind of misses the point. And then on the other side, you're going to say, we got what we wanted, or else everything's going to get burned to the ground, and that's justified, which, we don't necessarily agree with that either. We find it somewhere in the middle, and we think that there's a little bit more clarity that can be brought to this discussion that both of those sides are missing.
Right.
So if you've listened to the podcast at all, you kind of know generally how David and I think about things, is that all efforts to divide us, we the people, along race, socioeconomic status, gender, that's exactly what they are, is they're efforts to divide us. And who is dividing us, you might ask? It's people with power, the government. The ones who write the rules for themselves that we are all held to, but they can exempt themselves from the rules. They don't get prosecuted. They don't get put in jail. This is one instance where somebody did, justifiably so. And but that's rare. And the reason why it's rare is because we allow people we allow those in power to divide us. And what we think about this subject, we're hoping to kind of put that division to the side. David, got anything to say
Yes,
about the dividers in chief, the ones that rule us?
Well, all I'll say on that particular topic is that usually when somebody's pointing the finger at somebody else and saying, look how bad they're doing, look at what they're doing that's, egregious to your side, and they only want your blood on their hands, you should usually look at the person pointing the finger, because they've got three of those son bitches looking back at them. So When they're saying, look at these other guys, look at these other guys, well, who are the ones that put the laws in place for Derek Chauvin to even have the authority to take down the guy and kneel on his throat until he died? George Floyd.
And
I wasn't just skirting over his name because I forgot it, but I was just saying, usually when someone's pointing out and looking how evil they are, they're usually just as evil, if not 3 times more. That's all I'm saying.
Right. And so, our general takeaway of this whole thing, because like we said, both sides are the right might be upset about the verdict, and, the other side might be happy, but as long as they got their way. Our kind of general takeaway from this whole thing is as far as Chauvin's concerned in particular, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, right? You chose as your career to go into a line of work where you're paid with money stolen from the citizens, taxes. You get exemption from liability for your actions. And then on top of all of that, you enforce laws regardless of their morality, just because you're quote unquote following orders. And in spite of all of that, you still killed somebody unnecessarily. So I can't have a whole lot of sympathy for, whether or not your trial was fair, whether there was external pressure, on the jurors to find you guilty, and all of the technical details about, were the charges that were brought, were they proven in trial? I don't care, bro. You chose a career which makes you a predator to a lot of people, and you're paid off of money stolen from those same people. And then in the very rare instance that you do get caught doing something wrong, generally you get off with it because there's either an internal investigation that finds nothing wrong, or you have qualified immunity so they can't bring charges against you at all. You happen to be one of the unlucky guys who actually got charges brought and were put through a trial, and you got convicted. I don't feel bad for you. You played that game. You played it wrong. You killed somebody, it was on film, and now you're going to be sitting in the crossbar hotel for the next, at least 12 years. I can't feel sorry for you.
Yeah, it's really hard to feel sorry for somebody that was, let's call a spade a spade. He was using the badge to elicit force on somebody that, what came out through later investigation, they had run-ins before, and they were, let's just call it, less than friendly, and he'd use that badge because he was on duty to elicit his idea of justice, which usually is propagated and substantiated by his fellow members. But now, I mean, and then to harken back to the justice system, how the hell are you going to find nine? How many jurors were there? 9, or were there 11, or how many jurors were there? Do we know?
I don't know. I don't know. We know,
It,
but I don't.
it right. I mean, let's call it spade a spade. How the hell are you going to find somebody that's not going to know what the hell happened? Like in America, when they're during the time of quarantine, by the way, when they had nothing else to do but just sit there and watch TV, that was all you saw for about 2 months was Derek Chauvin kneeling on George Floyd. That's it. And then the protests that happened afterwards. So it's like, how are you going to find an impartial jury, number one? And do you want to parlay that into our next topic about?
Right, I know, but I mean, impartial jury, not impartial jury, that gets into the technicals of whether his trial was fair, which, like, that stuff I just don't care about. I don't care.
Right.
I don't care
Right,
if his trial was fair. I don't care if he got due process. I don't care about any of that because he wants to hold himself above the citizenry as a cop and get all these special privileges as a cop. And then if the system still happens to come down on him in spite of all the advantages he had as a cop, like, again, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. I just don't care. But
Right.
with that being said, we have a couple comments from a listener. So want to play those. So here we go.
I agree with you guys. First off, I mean, I just really hate this whole new thing, words that are saying, like, oh, you're a leftist. Oh, you're a conservative. Oh, this, that. You know, like, I just, you know, it's really, really, like, I'm 19 now. I just graduated from high school, like, last year. And honestly, it's really hard to start politics with all this stupid shit going on. I mean, really, what happened to just debate, you know, talking about it? Like, now everyone's like, bitch this, bitch that. Oh, you are a bad man. Oh, we're gonna kill you. Oh, we gotta burn it all to the ground. You know, I just, like, it really is not a discussion anymore. I feel like people are more concerned about their party than actually what is right. All right, George Floyd was wrongly killed. All right, and you guys are right that those laws need to be get rid of. We don't need to defund the police. We need to get rid of those laws that cause it. I mean, seriously. I mean, chokeholds. I mean, I guess you could get rid of that. All right, I get somewhat. However, you need to find another way because it's not just blacks, okay? Whites also need to, you know, don't give a shit. You know, they're going to try to get the fuck out, you know? And sometimes a chokehold is the way to get somebody down. I mean, I'm not saying, like put your knee on their neck. That's wrong, okay? That's just off the rails. That's fucking horrible. But, like, I mean, like, just hold them down for a second, you know? Like, find a way to hold them down because some people don't give up. You know, when the cops trying to get them. And also, too, something else, the no-knock warrant. I understand a lot of people were wrongly broken into. However, there are some cases where, you know, there's child trafficking or something where they would have to kick that door down because they don't know what's going on inside. And also, too, you don't know if people prepare when they hear the cops.
So Nick had 2 more comments, and we are going to get to those, Nick, if you're still listening. But there was a little bit to unpack with the first 2, so just want to talk about those. Yeah, first off, agree with you with the labels. Now, we only use the labels, you know, conservative, liberal, left, right, you know, describing ourselves as libertarians, that kind of thing, you know, purely as descriptive terms, because I mean, labels are useful in that regard so that we can have a conversation and know generally what we're referring to.
As a starting point.
Right. But yeah, we don't use those labels, and not that you were saying we were, but you know, just for clarification's sake, you know, we don't use those labels to put people in boxes and say, well, because this person is a leftist or a conservative, we don't have to engage with their opinion. We'll engage with all opinions, and we appreciate, you know, yours and your comments, you know, and being a part of the discussion. We'll engage, but you know, it is helpful to say, like, okay, like, this person generally has a feeling towards this subject matter, you know, along these lines. Now, there's plenty of nuances, and that's where the discussion happens. But yeah, I wanted to say, first of all, that we agree with you. The labels can be counterproductive to the discussion, but they can also be used if used correctly.
And also, we're kind of happy that a young man such as yourself is starting to see the fraud behind just applying a label to somebody and just knowing what their values are through and through. That's actually what we're trying to do with our podcast, is trying to break down the walls, trying to say like, hey, logic should rule out, even if
Yeah,
even if you believe that you're a liberal or a conservative, like that's fine, but we need to meet at logic, which is in the middle.
absolutely. I mean, at 19, I'm not going to date myself and tell you how old I am, but
Please don't.
I will say that me at your age was not as well versed and kind of worldly, so to speak, informed as you apparently are at 19. So definitely kudos to you on that.
You want to
But
get
yes.
into chokeholds?
Yeah, in terms of the chokeholds, I think we're all in agreement on that, right? That like generally speaking, that should be I mean, I would say in terms of hand-to-hand combat, it would be the same thing as with your gun. Use it sparingly.
Well, I
you don't
mean,
need it unless you really need it. But as soon as it's no longer needed, stop it.
And all the illicit conflicts that we keep bringing up, the George Floyd, the young man that got strangled to death for selling loose cigarettes in New York.
No.
Like
Eric Garner.
Eric Garner, thank you. No, I'm not saying that that's who George Floyd was. I just couldn't remember Eric Garner's name right out of the gate. But what I'm saying is, like, they were both subdued, they were both handled, and then they both said they can't breathe. So, harkening back to last week's conversation, when he fled, you know where they're going to be. You know where they're going to be. They're not going anywhere. They've been restrained. So therefore, the whole point of a chokehold is to restrain the person long enough to subdue them, to get them under control. They were both under control, and they both said they couldn't breathe, and they were both held under a chokehold long enough to expire. That's the problem with these vagrancies of the chokehold. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, and I mean the Floyd thing is especially egregious because these, like, Chauvin and Floyd knew each other. Like, I think at one point in time, before Chauvin was a cop or whatever, like, they both worked as bouncers at the same club. Like, they knew each other personally. Forget, just cop and civilian kind of thing. So, even if in some ridiculously implausible circumstance where Floyd is able to outrun them while handcuffed and get away, like, they know where to find. There's no reason to stay when he's already subdued, hands behind his back, 4 cops around, laying on his stomach, to then stay on his neck for that long. I mean, even if we grant to one side of the argument, like, yeah, there's a time and a place for chokeholds and, to subdue an unruly suspect, even if we grant that, there's a time and a place for it. And when the guy's in handcuffs on his stomach with 4 of you standing around, I would say that's the time where it's no longer necessary.
Right.
Which, it sounds like, that's the point that Nick was making. And so on that,
and lest we forget,
we agree.
Not only were there people standing around, officers standing around, but there was also pedestrians standing around, recording them doing more than they needed to. And that's why they were held accountable.
Telling him, repeating what Floyd was saying. He can't breathe. Get off of him, Right. So, yeah, okay, so Nick had a couple more comments. Do you want to play those so he can finish his thought?
I do believe in injustice. I do believe in oppression. I do believe blacks are still judged by the color of their skin, especially by police. And not just that, a lot of cases where whites were shot. One kid was autistic, 13, shot. For what? Running away? You see, like, cops aren't trained right. They aren't trained correctly. They aren't trained to the point where they could do right. And they can handle people with disabilities. They can handle people that are high off their head, like George Floyd was. He was high, but he didn't deserve to get the damn knee on his neck. That's wrong, and it's injustice. Okay, it's not that you need to defund the police, and I'm not blaming them, okay? I understand why they want to, but it's not that. It's the people that are in power that are making that rule, because really what should be done, put more money in the police, get rid of a lot of police officers that should not be police, and definitely take down the bastards who made that law, and take it out of the Constitution, or wherever else it is that allows it.
Yeah, and
I mean, Nick. I mean,
that comment had
he's taking the word
several
out of
things
our
to unpack.
mouths. He's taking the words out of my mouth, literally. Like I've said that before. It's the defunded the police is it's not the answer. The police need more training. Like harkening back to last week's conversation, Jocko Willink, a former Navy SEAL, said that Navy SEALs, whether on deployment or not, are training 40% of the time. Like these guys get released, with 2 or 3 weeks training, and they're just supposed to know what to do. And there's no weapon systems training. They might, practice their 9mm on a gun range every now and again, but there's no systematic training. Like to move forward, more training, absolutely. Go ahead, Dane.
Yeah, I mean, more training as long as, publicly serviced and available police exist. I guess I can go with you guys as far as that goes. But, kind of what we were talking about earlier is you can train them until the cows come home. If the incentives are screwed up, you're still going to have bad actors. They're just going to be more deadly trained actors. If they have qualified immunity that exempts them from suit, if they know that if they get off of the criminal charge and the family wants to sue them civilly, right, and get money out of them, that money doesn't come out of the cop's pocket. That money comes out of the taxpayers. So the family that wins the civil case has to pay their own taxes to fund their own settlement that they get from the city. Like there's absolutely no accountability that's built into the system. And as long as there's no incentives for bad action, if they can be exempted from criminal lawsuit on the front end and they don't have to pay the civil damages on the other side, like trained cops or no trained cops, you're going to have bad stuff happen. Now, you could say, well, Dane and David, it sounds like you're just complaining without a whole lot of solutions. No, we have solutions. First of all, on the criminal side, in qualified immunity. Quit treating people different from the rest of the citizens. And, this was kind of our litmus test. If if a civilian does what a cop does, would that civilian get locked up and the key thrown away? I think we all know the answer to that question. Absolutely. So quit treating them differently just because they have a badge and a uniform in qualified immunity. But the second thing, and probably the more important thing, is on the civil side of it. As the old saying goes, money talks and shit walks. If for every single cop who got sued for excessive use of force, and instead of the taxpayers having to pay the families, the tens of millions of dollars in damages, if that money instead came out of police pension funds, or if that cop's wages were garnished for the rest of his life until that family is paid off, that cop is going to think twice when they're faced with getting hit with a $10 million lawsuit for excessive use. And their buddies on the force are going to be like, hey, bro, you can't be acting out of pocket when you're on duty because you're costing the rest of us our pensions too. We're going to deplete the whole fund and we're not going to have any retirement because you keep roughing people up. That's the kind of personal accountability from within. Right, exactly. And that's this whole thing, right? The thin blue line, good cop versus bad cop. Well, all too often, the quote-unquote good cops aren't turning on the bad cops because if they do, then they're ostracized from within. So what you have to do is you have to turn that incentive around and say, listen, good cop, turn in your bad colleague because if you don't, all of your pensions are getting wiped out if you guys lose a civil lawsuit. That's a type of accountability thing that can be passed tomorrow. Legislatures can pass tomorrow. They can say no more qualified immunity and payments for civil suits has to come out of police pension funds. You would see a drastic change in police behavior overnight because now it's hitting them in their pockets and maybe putting them in a cage instead of us. So those are our proposed solutions for, how do you fix the incentives that are clearly messed up in the system. We have we have one more from Nick, and then we have a few comments from Stephen, who was here last week. Stephen, welcome back, sir. And then we'll get to Stephen's comment and see what he has to say. So one more from Nick.
I really don't care either. I mean, honestly, I think everyone should have a free trial, a trial. That's how our country works. Obviously, this guy's guilty, but, you can't, we're not China, okay? You're not just going to go to jail right away. Everyone deserves a trial. Whether you were caught stabbing the person or not, you should get a trial. It's fair enough, the American way. Okay, but still, like, why, just the people are really jumping corners to say this guy did nothing wrong. Okay, like he did, okay? It's on video. It's not hard to miss.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And David made the point earlier about the fairness of the trial. Good luck finding somebody who didn't know about this case when they were trying to seat a jury. Right? So if you're going to carry out your cop duties in such a way, and in today's day and age, everything is on film, like, I can't feel sorry for you if you are going to try to come back and claim that your trial wasn't fair. It's like,
Sure.
what do you want us to do about that?
The trial was
David,
right there on the videotape.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we all saw it, bro.
We saw what you did. We heard George Floyd. We heard all the other people saying, he can't breathe. You can take your knee off his neck now. We saw the other officer sitting there going, hands in pockets, not helping anybody. Like, granted, like we talked about last week, the people that were recording, if they would have stepped in and pushed Chauvin off, now they've assaulted an officer. Now they're going to jail too. But the officers that were there, could have been like, dude, cool off, douse your head in some water, walk it off. We'll take it from here. Like, and they just sat there and watched him kill a guy. Like, that's unacceptable. And you were guilty the moment that got uploaded to the internet. Period. Just like all these people that have got canceled for things that they said 20 years ago, and now they can't, go to work anymore, like, because they said some things that were wrong. Now you're wrong. Now you're guilty. Let's move on.
But back to the incentives. His fellow cops didn't step in and do anything because there are no incentives. There's just not. And as a matter of fact, because there's no incentives for them to step in, there's a huge disincentive for them not to step in. Because, again, if they step in, then when they get back to the police station later that night, they may have saved a guy's life, but the rest of his thin blue line is going to look at him and be like, bro, what do you think you're doing? Trying to make one of our own look bad, So because there's not any incentive to do the right thing on the front end, there's a huge disincentive to not do the right thing and an incentive to do the bad thing or the wrong thing by doing nothing. And that's what needs to be fixed. So a few comments here from Steven.
Hey, man, I'm just happy one of these pigs went to jail finally. Maybe these racist pigs will think twice before killing an unarmed black man, unnecessarily.
Hey, Steven, I agree, man. I mean, I don't know if you were here at the top of the episode, but that's kind of what we said is, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. He chose to be a cop. He chose to enforce, nonviolent. Like, let's be honest. The whole reason why the stop was started because George Floyd allegedly was using a counterfeit $20 bill. That's not a reason to escalate a confrontation with somebody. Yet Chauvin and the rest of the cops decided to escalate it to the point that it got to where it got, and he killed the guy. So are we supposed to feel sorry for him? Absolutely not. So, agree with you on that one.
And the guy who killed that 13-year-old in Chicago needs to be fucking tried with murder too, because that kid had his hands up. And you tell me if someone has their hands up, it's not fucking murder. If you're in the war and the enemy surrenders to you with a white flag and you still shoot him, that's a fucking war crime. You go on international war crime, right? Am I correct or what?
I believe he's invoking the Geneva Convention. Am I right, Nate?
Yeah. In terms of you have to give the enemy combatant or whatever in the war setting a chance to give themselves up, and if they do, you can't shoot them. So yeah, he's right. And that's the thing. I don't know if you know which case he's talking about, David. Adam Toledo, a 13-year-old kid. Now, allegedly, he had a gun or whatever. That's not clear on the body cam. But the point is, when he was told to turn around and put his hands up, he did, and then the cop shot him. Again, Stephen, going back to our general litmus test that we apply to all of these situations where a cop kills somebody is, if a private citizen did that, would the private citizen go to jail? And the answer is almost always yes. So just because the person who pulls the trigger happens to wear a badge and a uniform and works for the state doesn't, in our eyes, give them some kind of special privileges out of being prosecuted for something that the rest of us would already be sitting in jail for.
Well,
so,
Dane.
Agree with you.
Before we move on to the next point, shouldn't we also discuss that our whole initiative is to not only point out the bad actors, but to point out the people that made the scenario possible for the bad actors to act badly? Can I say that? Like,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, tied in with what we talked about last week, in case some of the people are new here this week. But yeah, go ahead. The point we made last week.
Yeah. Go. So it's the egregious laws that stand out to present opportunities for confrontation and escalation into these particular points. Like, what's that book again? I know we had a week to look it up. I just heard it and I'm blanking on it now. The ordinary man commits a felony.
I misspoke on the title. Yeah, I misspoke on the title last week. I said 5, but the actual title of the book is 3 Felonies a Day, and it's written by a former criminal defense attorney who, in the book, he argues and says that every single citizen commits 3 federal felonies a day, and he goes down in terms of the completely ridiculous things that you wouldn't think are felonies, but they are. And he says every single person commits about 3 a day. So if the police wanted a pretext to approach anybody at any given time to create a confrontation and potentially escalate it, it could happen to any one of us at any point in time.
And there was
because there's too many laws. Yeah.
There was a Stalin quote that said, "You point out the man, I'll find the crime he's committed." That's what it leads to. It's not that these laws are here for your safety. It's that when they get so out into the ether that all you have to do is stop the person and you'll find something they've done wrong. Therefore, they're a criminal. Now you get thrown into a legal system that doesn't have your back, that's been set up against you. And why is that? Is that for the people that you've elected that have made this particular scenario? Is that what it is?
Well, that kind of gets to the more meta problem that we talked about last week, is that, our basic, kind of, if you were to put it on a bumper sticker, what is our argument in terms of that is the bumper sticker slogan is, if there is no victim, there is no crime, right? So let's think about the war on drugs as a general principle, because that single policy puts more people in cages for victimless crimes than anything else. Now, there's a lot of seedy stuff that goes on in the underworld that has to do with drugs, in terms of, like theft and, murder and all of that kind of stuff. Those are not the crimes that we're talking about, because those would be crimes whether drugs are involved or not. What we're talking about is like simple possession. I don't care. Obviously, weed is the easy one, because weed doesn't kill anybody. It's in the 8,000 years human beings have been smoking weed, nobody's overdosed on weed. So that's the easy one to say, why are you putting people in cages for possessing a dime bag of weed? That's just stupid. You're ruining lives. You're giving them permanent records to where even if they do get out, they can't get a job and be gainfully employed, which then forces them back on the street, back into the underworld, back into seedier, dangerous situations. And it's just absurd. But we would take it, or I would, David, you could tell me if you disagree, I would take it a step further, all the way to open it up to every single drug. Like, yes, heroin, meth, things like that are much more dangerous than weed. But the simple fact of the matter is, if you didn't rob anybody to get whatever substance you're trying to put in your body, and you didn't, kill somebody or commit other sort of crime that does have a victim attached to it, and you shoot up and overdose, yeah, we feel bad for you. We feel bad for your family. No life is a throwaway like that, and we feel bad for people that have a legitimate drug addiction. But that doesn't mean that the state should be running around, lassoing people up just because they put a substance in their body that the state disagrees with, and throwing them in a cage and giving them a record, et cetera, et cetera. Basically,
Well,
you're answering a victimless action by creating an actual victim when you throw somebody in a cage, or it can lead to death like this.
All I'll say is I was setting this thing up on a tee for you, and in natural Dane fashion, you went all the way into the other batter's box and started running around the goddamn plates.
It happens. It happens. What do you want from me?
To discuss the goddamn Maxine Waters coming over to Minnesota to tell everybody what they should be thinking from California. Do you want to address that?
Right, and yes, we're gonna go there. But we want to play this one more from Steven.
The thing is, the justice isn't served whenever a black person is killed. When you saw that police officer in Minnesota who shot that white woman, he served 12 years. Nobody asked a question. There was no fucking riots because justice was served. That's all people want, is just equal justice for black and white victims.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that it shouldn't matter what the race, color, or creed of the victim is. You know, cops that do things that would get the rest of us as private civilians thrown in a cage should get them thrown in a cage. So,
sure,
agree with you wholeheartedly. Now, you know, since we've spent the vast majority of the episode so far, you know, basically destroying the more, you know, cop sympathetic side of the argument, and you know, kind of laying out why we don't feel bad for him at all, and you know, in this one instance, justice may have been served in terms of him going to jail. Do want to kind of talk about the other side, because, you know, you have. And we're just going to use, you know, one representative to highlight basically the type of behavior we're talking about. You know, you have Maxine Waters, who is a federal politician from California, and she makes it a point to come to Minnesota, so not even her state, not her constituents, to come to Minnesota and start, you know, demanding an outcome in a trial, and that we're going to stay in the streets and we're going to stay confrontational, and basically continue to inflame the passions that are already surrounding this entire situation. And first of all, it's just not very intelligent on her behalf.
Do you want to call a spade here? Do you want to call a spade here?
Well, I want to get out the 2 points first, but.
Well, okay, go ahead. Get out the 2 points.
I mean,
then I'll get my spade.
Okay, the first one is it does no help for her own side, because right after she did it, the judge looked at the defense counsel in the eyes and said, you know, what she did may get you a mistrial. So as we sit here today, he's guilty, but he may get a mistrial because her saying that, if they can prove that it infected the jury's decision making, where the jury's like, we better convict, or else, you know, there's going to be more rioting and looting. She just hurt her own side by doing that. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, you know, trying to divide us along color lines is the problem that she's engaging in when she does that, and that is definitely not going to get us to where we want to be in terms of a more, you know, just and equitable society. But those are the 2 points. We're going to circle back to them. But what was your point, David?
My whole point is that exactly what you said. The second point was, and even more egregious, like, she was trying to make a name off of showing up to a place and take advantage of the fact that there was a tragedy that happened. If anything should happen, she should be blacklisted for trying to do so. Like, she's trying to take the pain of an entire nation and an entire culture and make herself a career out of it. Period. She tried to make a name for herself out of the George Floyd thing, which is, I don't know,
she's already
sycophantic at best.
She's already made a name and a career for herself out of living high off the hog of stealing from the citizens in terms of her salary being paid by taxes. Like, whether you're her constituents that, yeah, but
that's not the point that I'm trying to make. So go ahead.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, she's been doing this long before this case in terms of, you know, making, you know, trying to make it about her and her position and her power. But kind of a corollary to what you're saying with that, one thing she's not going to say, and no politician is ever going to say, is we screwed up. we shouldn't have these drug laws. We shouldn't have, like, qualified immunity should not be a thing. We need to get to work in Congress right now and repeal qualified immunity. We need, like, those are things that she could say that would be legitimately helpful, right?
Sure.
And that, yeah, but she's never going to say that, because why? Because it admits fault on not only her part personally, but on the political class. But they want to be able.
You remember how we started this whole conversation with always be weary of the people that are pointing the most at the other side for being your enemy, because usually they've got at least three pointing back at them. If you want to get, down to the nitty-gritty, her profession and what she chose to delve into made it possible for Derek Chauvin to do what he did. And now that Derek Chauvin did what he did, she's looking to grandstand and benefit from it. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
There you go.
And that's the kind of thing with the overlawed society. Cops always say we don't write the rules, we just enforce them. Now, if what we got to in the first part of this episode is that's a BS kind of cop out, no pun intended. Because just because you quote unquote follow orders and enforce the laws, everybody has the ability to stop and judge a situation and be like, is this morally justified? I don't care what the law says. Is it justified for me to put somebody in handcuffs and escalate the situation to the point that they die? Anybody, whether they have a badge on or not, can look at that and say, no, that's not justified, so I'm not going to do it. But stepping back from that, she, as a member of the political class, I haven't heard her saying we need to absolutely repeal all the drug laws because that's kind of the underlying cause that creates these situations. I haven't seen her calling for an end to qualified immunity. There was a bill that just came up in front of the House last year, and it was co-sponsored by Justin Amash, who was the only Libertarian member of Congress, and I forget, it was a Democrat, and it may have been AOC. But anyway, they co-sponsored a bill to end qualified immunity. Now, they went out and they really beat the bushes in the media about we need to pass this bill because we need accountability for police. I didn't see Maxine Waters say a damn thing about that. Now, maybe she's been in her position of power too long that the blinders are pulled over her eyes and she doesn't care. But to come back as Johnny come lately and say, we need to continue to be violent and get confrontational if we don't get the outcome in this case we want, that is not only skirting her responsibilities to be accountable as an elected official and say, we've screwed up, we've let these cops get away with too much for too long, and we're going to fix it as your elected representatives, but to then pour fire or pour gasoline on the already, fire that is going on in Minnesota and say, burn more businesses down, destroy more lives, destroy your communities more if we don't get what we want. That's just highly irresponsible.
By the way, it wasn't her community that she was saying to destroy. She's like a person at a high school party that wants to come to the party and screw up everything, like take a shit on the pool table and like crash the computer with a hammer. Like, oh yeah, that's fun. But then when they go home, they're all good. It's
yeah, and then leave. Backlash. Yeah, and then leave before the cleanup starts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, I'm glad you came to my party and decided to destroy my house. Now you're going to stay to clean it up? No, it's not my house, so it's not my problem. Bye.
And that's kind of the other thing is like, okay, I get it. She's an elected official. She's not going to say, hey, people, stop burning down the businesses of your fellow citizens and neighbors, target government buildings. I'm not going to expect her to say that, but she knows that when she says we're going to stay in the streets and we're going to keep being confrontational and we're going to keep, when she says that, whose business or whose property does she know is going to get destroyed? The average citizen, the people that live in those communities.
She used the word "we" a lot, but do you think she would have been a part of those protests without, some guards along with her or anything like that? Do you really think that?
No, absolutely not.
Exactly. That's all I'm saying. It's like she wanted to rebel rouse. And then, by the way, wasn't it just a couple of months back when they tried to indict Donald Trump for storming the Capitol for doing less than what Maxine Waters just did in Minnesota?
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
I mean,
Am I wrong?
you would think that turnabout's fair play.
Right. Like you would hold yourself to a higher standard when you're holding Donald Trump, the lowest of the low, to a certain standard. You definitely wouldn't play the same game he would. But here
Yeah.
you are, not 4 months, 5 months later, doing more than what he did in his own rally. Like you went someplace else that wasn't your business and stuck your finger into the pie and said, guess what? Let's storm the streets and then try to muddle your way out of there before, for any of the actual guff came to fruition. Yeah. Like you aren't fighting for justice. You're fighting for your name and you're fighting for your cathedral, your side.
Right. Period. And before we're getting backed up on comments, and I do want to get to them, but I just wanted to kind of like put a little bow on what you were saying there is like, and let's think about the difference between the two. We're not going to put any moral judgments on it. We're not going to say one was right and the other was wrong, but just consider this. The people who stormed the Capitol, whether they were right or wrong, were mad at the government. They say rigged the election, whatever, but they were mad at the government. So what did? They attacked the government building with government officials that they were mad at. On the opposite side of the situation with the Derek Chauvin trial, the people are justifiably upset at the police, and they should be, but they're not going to attack government buildings. I mean, they did last year. They attacked some police stations and some courthouses in different cities around the country, but by and large, the people that are being attacked are innocent citizens. Small business owners in their own communities, barbershops and little hole-in-the-wall restaurants and, things like that. Like average citizens that are just as victimized by the police as they are, and they're going to create more victims by burning, their cities to the ground when they're really mad at the government. And so then when Maxine steps in, she doesn't say, you know what, this is all on us. As the government, we have failed you. We're supposed to represent your interests, and we clearly have not done that. We apologize. That would have been the responsible thing to say. But no, she says turn up the heat, knowing that the heat is directed in the direction of, private business owners, just mom and pop shops just trying to make it in this world. So, all right. So a couple comments. We'll play Steven's first, and then we'll get to Nick's.
Man, forget what Maxine Waters did. The right's going to hate and Fox News going to hate all day. It doesn't matter what she says. She's only saying the truth. If he would have walked, there would have been riots in Minnesota. She was just saying the truth that we all know. Same thing with January 6th. We all knew there was going to be fucking riots, but nobody did anything about it.
That's fair.
I think Democrats are always too harsh on ourselves, but fucking the right says crazy shit all the time and they get away with it. Trump says some crazy shit and he got supported by the Republicans, didn't he? Trump instigated January 6th and nothing fucking happened. Matt Gaetz, all these motherfuckers instigated this violent act of insurrection and nothing happened. So what Maxine Waters says is irrelevant, man. Leave her out of it. As a black woman has a right to say what she wants because that's her people. That's all I gotta say.
So, respectfully disagree on that, Steve. I mean, we kind of laid out our case before we got to your comments, and we can see you disagree, and that's fine. No. Why are we sorry? We feel the way we feel about it, and he feels the way he feels about it.
I was saying sorry that we got to our point before we listened to his comment. Not that we're sorry about our point.
Oh, yeah.
We're on the same page.
So, maybe what we had to say didn't convince you. I don't know if it did or not. But here's the thing: is this division and it happens from the top down first, the leaders first, that try to divide us along left versus right lines, black versus white lines, male versus female lines, rich versus poor lines.
Any line you want to draw.
The dividers are never, ever, ever on your side. Trump is not on the side of the people who support him, and Maxine Waters is not on your side. That's the point we're making. They have all the power. They write the rules. They exempt themselves from the rules that you and I would be thrown in a cage for. They give their enforcers of the rules a special badge and a uniform and give them exemptions from doing the laws that they pass. And then they try to come after the fact and say it's a black versus white thing. It's a rich versus poor thing. It's not. It's them versus all of us.
And by the way, all the people, when she's saying to burn down the streets because of what Chauvin did, when you come for her, who's going to be protecting her from you? Those people that she just told you to burn down a whole city for. Those people in badges are going to protect her from you. That's the crux of the matter. She's telling you that your enemies are everyone around you, but then when you come for her, she's going to have those same people that she's told you to burn down a city for protecting her from you. That's all we're saying.
Yep. The people in power are not your friends, whether they call themselves Democrats, Republicans, or anything else. Look out, again, our litmus test. Would an average citizen go to jail for doing the things that politicians and their enforcers and law enforcement do not go to jail for? If the answer to that question is yes, then this whole facade of the government, we the people are the government and we are our government, that's exactly what it is. It's a facade. They don't represent us. They don't have our interests in mind because they exempt themselves from liability for the very things that they throw us in cages for. They are not our friends. So we have a couple comments from a new commenter, so I want to get to his before we get back to Nick.
Please.
King Rooster.
So you guys are having an intellectually dishonest conversation. So I'm going to provide some clarification. Maxine Waters, one, never said to continue to burn down buildings or destroy structures. She said continue to get more confrontational. That is what she said. Adding more rhetoric to what she said, just say if what you believe she said was so wrong and abhorrent, then stick to the facts and the language that she used. That's the first point. Second point, in Seattle, Washington, the young man who was convicted of burning police cars and breaking into police cars and stealing weapons out of them, white. I can't remember the exact city and state right now, but where the young man was killed in that parking lot, falling asleep in his car, and they burned down. I think it was like the drive-through was white.
All right, so King Rooster had two more comments. No. He had two more, and I do want to play them. I just want to point out because he had 2 points. First point, in terms of, I didn't say, or we didn't say that she said continue to go burn down buildings or whatever. But if the situation is such that buildings are already being burned down, and somebody comes in and says stay in the streets, get confrontational, does that sound to you like she's trying to reduce the amount of destructive activity that's going on, or she's trying to say, it's not that much of a problem? So it's not that she has to explicitly say keep doing the bad stuff. It's the point that she's not calling out the bad stuff for what it is. And I get that, maybe you came to the episode a little bit later. We spent the entire first 3/4 of the episode talking about how the guilty verdict was justified, and all of the rhetoric from the right, the cop apologist, is completely ridiculous, and that we don't care that Chauvin's in jail, and he should be in for the rest of his life. But we didn't mischaracterize what she said, but what she did say is not helpful. On your second point about when you make the point about somebody being destructive and being white, again, that you're assuming you're assuming that we have implied something, that the only people that are being destructive are not white, which is not what we said at all. We know that Antifa is heavily involved in these protests. We know that Antifa is heavily white, young white males especially, and we know that they're the ones going into the communities and inciting the riots. So the fact that that's a non-starter for us.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not trying to make this
Because
a race issue. We're trying to stay on topic and discuss. Go ahead, Dane.
right, destruction of private property when the private property owners are not the ones who did anything wrong. Again, the government did something wrong. Its agents did something wrong. If you want to be angry, attack. Again, let me set this disclaimer aside.
Breaks.
Do not. This is not an invitation or anything to say go and attack government buildings. But what we are saying is your local government building is a much more justified target than AutoZone or a little mom and pop barbershop or restaurant. Exactly. But he had a couple more comments, and I do want to let him finish his piece.
Individuals who say that the top has been trying to divide us between black and white lines, I only hear that coming out of white mouths, not black mouths. I hear that only coming out of white people's mouths. You guys continuously say that the top echelon of the society is trying to divide us without looking at America's entire history in which white people have thrived in a society that had the lesser class be the black class. White America has thrived in that society. All black people are asking for is equality and equity in America, a country in which we protect, serve, and love.
You want to play the next one? Play the next one. Just play the next one. Let's get all the way through it, and then we'll dissect it. Keep going. His last comment.
He has 2 more. So,
okay. And instead of getting that, we get a bunch of empty. Oh well, that's just a narrative that's being said, and or this person didn't comply, or blacks kill black. Like there's so many constant excuses instead of white America just fixing the problem within white America that causes racism to be an issue. The abuser is the one who has to fix the abuse in a relationship. It is not the person who is being abused's responsibility to change the behavior of the abuser. In America, black people are not the abuser. They are the one being abused in the situation and in the relationship. So Maxine Waters doesn't need to get black people more riled up. Black people are already fed up and riled up. Maxine Waters does not need to get us charged. The fact that in the middle of us waiting for the results of the Derek Chauvin verdict, a young 15-year-old girl was killed. Now, I know everybody's like, well, this girl had a gun and she was lunging at another girl. We have seen people shoot up fucking stores across America and be taken into custody without being killed. Grown-ass men in tactical gear not being shot and killed by cops. We don't need excuses from Maxine Waters to get charged.
All right, so we'll set the Maxine thing aside because we've kind of addressed that several times. Do want to make a couple points about the first comment. First of all, not hearing the top down kind of thing from anybody except white mouths. Again, you don't have to take it from us, but 2 people in particular that I'll direct you to. One is named Eric July, and the other one, his name is Maj Touré. Maj Touré runs an organization called Black Guns Matter. He goes into his communities and he teaches people how to be responsible with firearms and, basically protect themselves in large part because the police are not protecting their own communities. And I challenge you, if you think that it's only white people that are making this top-down argument, to go and listen to those 2 individuals because, we would agree with them 100%. And it's not a black versus white thing. It is a the state has clearly exempted itself from actions that the rest of us would go to jail for. And, on top of that, they're the ones that perpetuate the rhetoric that try to divide us. And, on your second point about, white America
and the
fix
abuser?
it. Yeah, exactly. Did you have something about that, David? Go ahead.
On a psychological standpoint, there is no incentive for the abuser to ever change their action. So it's in the action of the abused to figure out what is causing the abuse and to mitigate it that way. The abuser is going to continue to abuse whether or not you like them to or not. That's the simple, and that harkens back to our first point, is that we're saying that the abuser is the government. You need to figure out how, or the top down is from those that have the government and those are the right rules, and then fix that. But there's no incentive for the abuser to ever change their attitude of abuse until they are met with an obstacle. So you have to create the obstacle. They're not just going to do it out of the goodness of their heart, period.
And the point I wanted to make on the abuser versus abuse standpoint is you didn't say it explicitly, so feel free to clarify. But you insinuated this kind of whole collectivist notion, right? That white people as a giant blob in society are responsible for being abusers, and black individuals or minority communities in society are the ones that are being abused. Well, first of all, human beings are not collective blobs. We are all individuals. I have never personally abused anybody. So whatever the history of America is, and whatever other white individuals have done.
How dare you, Dane? How dare you, sir? You hit me. You tell me I'm stupid all the time. I'm just kidding. Whatever individuals in power that were white throughout history who abused non-whites does not reflect on me and my personal decisions as an individual. Every person I meet, I treat with respect until I don't get that respect in return, and then I just cut that person off. There's no reason to stay around and be toxic. But this whole collectivist idea that a bunch of people that belong to an arbitrary group like race or gender or whatever the case may be, that because they belong to that group, there's some sort of like original sin that's imbued upon them, and they're the ones that are perpetuating the abuse, is just, I mean, that's just nonsense. I just, on that point, that one individual point, and again, feel free to clarify if that's not what you meant, I wholeheartedly disagree with you. I think if we're going to find any common ground on this, we have to realize where is the locus of control, where is the focal point of force. And I don't have any ability to garnish 30% of your wages like the government does in form of taxes. I don't have the ability to send out my goons to enforce my rules on you and potentially do something bad if you don't comply. The government does. I don't have the ability to exempt my goons from going to jail if they do something bad to you. The government does. So whether I'm white or anything else is irrelevant, because I don't have any power relevant to that power center. And you don't have the ability to get a hold of anybody that tells you that the other side or anybody else is the one that's the cause of that said abuse, period. So like you were saying, we don't have those voices. They do. So maybe start there and then work your way down. However, I will say that we are 9 minutes away from our cutoff time, so we can probably take a couple more comments, and then we've got to start getting to our final points.
Yes. I do want to get to a guy named Swan Burris, who is commenting for the first time.
What about the other two guys that were holding down George Floyd? I know Derek took the heat for it because he was on camera and had his knee on the guy's neck, but I'm not a forensics expert about can you breathe with a knee on your neck, but in my experience, if your diaphragm doesn't have anywhere to go, and your lungs cannot expand, then that's why you can't breathe. especially since the guy's face was turned sideways, I'm pretty sure somebody can have their knee on your neck and you can still breathe. But if somebody is on your chest and your chest cannot expand to get air, how come those other two cops didn't get convicted? What do you think?
Well, like we said before, go ahead.
Well, hold on. As far as I know, every cop that was there is still facing charges. They haven't had their trial yet, but as far as I know, they're still facing charges. I don't think that any of them have got off. So they may still face the consequences of their actions, as we would agree that they should. But yeah, in terms of what those charges are and when their trial is, we don't know. So,
like we addressed before in the conversation, he probably came in a little bit late.
All right, so a couple comments from Steven, then we'll start back at the top with Nick.
The motherfucking president says stand down and stand by to the fucking Proud Boy, white supremacists, white nationalists. I don't give a fuck what she says. She says stay in the streets. That's a First Amendment right, and that's all. That's all I gotta say.
I mean, Steven, listen, we would say the same thing about Trump. We're saying about Maxine Waters.
Right.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
If you're eliciting conflict, that's a problem. That's all we're saying right now. Is that they were holding him to the standard back in January 6th. We're holding her to the same standard they set for him right now. That's it. That's all we're saying.
Right.
What's up with the moderates that stood on the sidelines for 20 years? It wasn't until George Floyd's death that they stood up and fucking actually shook up and actually realized what was happening. I've been around since Rodney King riots. I've been seeing this shit since 30 years. But I'm saying, it's the moderates that need to fucking step in and do something, because they're just watching from the sidewalk, like you're saying. They're not interfering.
Well, I mean, I can't speak for all the moderates, but I will tell you this. I personally self-identify as a libertarian. I think David does as well. And libertarians have been calling for an end to qualified immunity since before Rodney King. So, I'm going back to the point about everybody's not just one big blob, and everybody is an individual who has individual thoughts and opinions and things like that. People that see the world in a similar way that I do have been fighting for accountability for the police for a lot longer than this stuff has been going on. So, do with that information what you will.
It's the white jury that lets these abusive cops walk, isn't it? It's always the white jury. It's not black juries, because they know. We've been seeing it since Rodney King.
I mean, I know that this jury was 50-50. I think there were 12 jurors, 6 white, 6 black, but I don't know the racial makeup of all the juries in all of these cases. One more from Swan, who was following up on his question from earlier.
Earlier, you were saying that if one cop is out of line and roughs people up, then all of the police officers on that force should have to cough up their pension. So you're saying that on the one hand, one person's actions means everybody's responsible for that guy screwing up. And now you're acting like, well, I'm not all white people. I'm an individual. What I do shouldn't impact how everybody is treated. So which is it?
Well,
listen, yeah, go ahead.
If I may. Well, when you're a member of a team, which is a police force, if we can all agree with that, you're a member of a whole team. Every individual is accountable to the tribe. And what we've seen in a lot of cases is that the tribe protected the individual and not vice versa. So what we're saying is that if one person acts out of line, it's the responsibility of the team to make up for that, to be accountable for that one bad actor, and that will mitigate the bad actors. You got another point, Dan?
Yes, the point that I was going to make is think of it like that, and I do appreciate the question and the opportunity to clarify, because there does seem to be some tension between those two things. And so what I would say is look at it like this. Let's say you have a private company and one of their employees does something wrong, and as a company they're found negligent, and so then they have to have a huge payout such that it breaks the company, it financially breaks the company. Right? All of the other employees at the private company are going to lose a job. Right, because their employee can't keep them hired anymore. So it's just the same thing. The only problem is this is in a public context where police departments don't earn dollars. They don't have to make their customers happy in order to keep their salaries. They are funded coercively via taxation, and whether we're happy with their service or not, they're going to keep getting paid. So, yeah, it might seem unfair to hit the other police officers in the pension fund for, the bad actors of one, but that's because this is a public institution. It's not a private company. But in either case, in the private company that does something wrong and so everybody loses their job, or in this public case where the only way to hit, the police department in and of itself and not make taxpayers have to bear the burden of, nefarious acts of cops, that's the only way to do it. So it might seem unfair to the rest of the cops, but as David was getting to the point about the tribe mentality, that encourages the other cops to keep each other in line because
it's like a team.
They're on the hook for
sport.
it financially.
It's a team sport.
Yeah.
If the goalie doesn't make the save, right? Go ahead.
Yeah. So Nick had quite a few comments. We'll start at the top with Nick. David, I don't know if you have to go at some point. I do want to get through these comments, even if it's just listening to them without response. But we have a few from Nick, and they're pretty long. So starting back at the top.
I feel like if the government was like it was in the 50s, not counting Jim Crow laws and stuff, that let's just say it's 2021, and the government is like it was in the 50s, they really did have caring for best interests in everyone's hearts, people like John F. Kennedy, who really cared for the people, and really wanted to make changes for the people, was actually for the people. I feel like we would be better, even then with the, shitty medical care, shitty, social interaction with blacks and, people with disabilities and stuff like that, and women and stuff like that, those very bad social things. If all the social stuff was the same as 2020, as it is now, I feel like things would be better because I just feel like everything is just divided and everyone is causing uproar. Just for uproar, just to fuck with everyone. I feel like some of these uproars, some of these celebrities who come out and stuff like that, I feel like all these things happen just to make us go crazy. I think it was in South Park, and obviously it's a show, but it made a good point. They said that the government actually made up all the controversies about 9/11. It was terrorists, but they made it up that it wasn't. They're making up all these theories. And they did it to make everyone distrust them for a reason. They did it because they wanted it. They wanted the chaos because I don't know, maybe for money. I'm not sure. But they done it for a reason. I just feel like if the government was real and actually was for the people, I feel like the laws would have been changed already. In the 1990s, that case where that guy got fucking beat up, these 5 cops are beating the shit out of this guy, all right, in the street, and they actually recorded it and they were caught, all right. I think then that they should have made those laws you guys speak of, where the cops, actually lose something and stuff. It's just it's like they don't care, they're only playing the game. Like my friend Brett says, I have some issues with my mom, and he says, Nick, just play the game, and play with them, thinking that you're on your side, but you're not. If they really were on our side, they would have made changes already. But they aren't. This stuff has been happening longer than anyone can think of. They just don't care. I just feel like if the government was real and actually was for the people, I feel like the laws would have been changed already in the 1990s.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he did.
Fucking it up. They're fucking it up, all right? The black community and many others are fighting to end the problem, to have equal rights. They're not trying to burn fucking down buildings, okay? And that's the thing. A bunch of stupid racists that live, whatever, they're going to see it like that. They're going to see that, the blacks, look what they're doing and stuff, but they aren't. They're blacks that are burning down buildings, but it's also whites too. Or I think most of the people that burn down those buildings are stupid young people. Young guys who really just want a thrill, and they're just stealing and looting and burning all these places. Did you see the video with Jake Paul? All right, seriously, this isn't. I don't think it's for justice that these people aren't doing what the real people who really want really want changes. Obviously, I do understand why there's anger. There should be, but you know, it's just making everything worse. By saying that, you're right. She's making everything worse. She's making the whole situation worse than it actually is. And one more thing, too, about the whole court system. Here's another thing. And this is something I learned from my aunt. All right, we look at these court cases, all right? And the thing is about some people, they're just convinced that they did the crime, all right? Like, let's look at a TV, all right? And they say, this man, he shot somebody. And then my aunt is like one of those people who are like, oh my God, I can't believe he shot someone. And, you know, and then he's like let off free. And she's like, oh man, you know, he's a killer and stuff. And these are people who like did not even watch the news. Like they saw that one thing on the news and they're convinced he did it. You know, and then this guy's free. He did nothing wrong. Literally did nothing wrong. Okay, he was proven wrong. Like the evidence was nothing. He did nothing wrong. He's still harassed every day because he did something wrong when he didn't. Because these people don't really know anything. They just want to stir up trouble and stir the pot because they have nothing better to do. Here's even a point. Just think of high school, okay? Think of how those idiots, some people used to run the fuck around and cause up trouble. They used to say stupid shit to get people's reaction and stuff like that. Just imagine that in the adult world. Just imagine people in power who were like that in high school and who didn't change, and they just want to cause uproar. They like it. Some people just like the craze, the chaos. They don't care. I agree with what you're saying, King. Definitely, that's true. A very dark history, and honestly, I don't even get it myself. I mean, I never done any race crimes or anything like that, or said anything racist, or never been racist. It doesn't make sense. And you're right. A lot of people have benefited from the race segregation and all that. And they really didn't. You know, the blacks, they didn't benefit at all from any of it. And of course they didn't, because it was made against them. Like a lot of people say that blacks are killing blacks and whatever. That's true, but you know, the point is they're in those dangerous places. I mean, and a lot of people who are black and are in dangerous places, they're in there because of segregation. All right, most black people and other minorities are in these hoods and stuff because of the system. And I did read that up, so I do agree with you. And I understand too why blacks would be upset, and they are. It makes sense. It's just many years, and honestly, I think maybe this is one of the first times that a cop even went to jail because of it. And it's ridiculous that we still live in a world such as this. It's just completely wrong that we still live like this. You know, I just think most of the people who burn down the buildings are young people. And they are. They're just people, mostly white, I think, that really burn down these buildings. And, you know, and the real people I've talked to, you know, on Stereo and other places, who really want injustice, and, you know, even been in some of the, not the riots, but the protests, these are young, old, and many ages who really just want equality. That's all people of color wanted. That's all anybody wanted. And it's just wrong that the government doesn't want to do that. And like I said in other points, I think they just don't care. Because if they did, they would have done it a long time ago.
Pause. Is it the last one?
No, there's 3 more. There's one more from each.
Stop.
Yes, exactly we're going to play these 3 and that's it.
No. What I'm saying is that that's exactly what we've been arguing. Is that it's not.
Oh yes.
That's exactly what we've been arguing. It's that it's not the black or white issue. It's the policymakers that are making it a black and white issue. Also, it's the policymakers that are making it possible for these things to happen. That's all we've been arguing this entire time. Go ahead.
The main takeaway, and the only thing I wanted to comment about all of Nick's comments is he kept reiterating they don't care. They do not care.
Because it's fodder for them to get reelected, and they have no interest in helping you whatsoever. That's why you need to hold them accountable. Whether it be Maxine Waters or Donald Trump, you need to hold them accountable. That's all we're saying.
Here's a classic example of them not caring, and I'll use the other side as the example, the conservatives, since you know the general tone of the commenters on this episode, I think, seemed to be more against the right or conservatives or whatever. Yeah. So here's a classic example, right? Republican politicians every 4 years trot out pro-life, right? They're going to end Roe v. Wade. They're going to stop abortion. They're going to stop that, right? And they use that to campaign, raise funds, get their people to the polls to make sure that they stay elected. Yet every single time, whether they have a majority in both houses and the presidency and they have all the power and they can do all of the things they campaigned on, they don't do it. Why? Because they don't care. Because they use whatever issue it is that you happen to care the most about. In this context, evangelical Christians really hate abortion, and so they don't want to fix the problem, because if they fix it, then in 4 years they can't campaign on it. And both sides do this, and they do it because they don't care about anything but maintaining their power and keeping the rest of us fighting with each other instead of fighting them.
Got it.
So, last 3 comments.
So, who makes up the majority of the government? When you look at government, when you look at the military, let's take the military, for example. I was in the Navy. On an aircraft carrier, there's 5,500 people on a deployment. There's about 5,500 people, including Air Wing, on a deployment. The majority of those individuals on the ship are Caucasians. So let's just broaden that out to America. So when you look at the American government, the majority of the people making the rules are white people. And black people who are in those positions, oftentimes we don't regard as being part of our community or struggle or representing us. So us being armed lately is not really safe for the abuser, because we come in with bullets for the abuser.
Okay, but here's the thing about most of the people being in power being of one race or another. Most of the people in power in China, when their government exterminated 40 million people, were Chinese. Most of the people in power in Cambodia, when their government exterminated about 13 million, were Cambodian. Most of the people in power in Russia, when they exterminated about 30 million, were Russian. Most of the people in Cuba, who exterminated several 100,000, if not into the millions, were Cubans. And the same thing is going on in Venezuela today. The point is not what demographic has the power. The point is that once that absolute power is achieved, those that have it do atrocious things. Now, we've been lucky at this point in American history that, we haven't had a, Pol Pot, Stalin, Mao, Castro type situation, at least in the 20th century. We're not setting aside early America when, definitely hundreds of thousands and millions of black slaves were brutally, killed, tortured, all of that kind of stuff. Absolutely. Those are just as egregious as the crimes of the 20th century that I just named. But the common theme running between all of those situations are not only that white people are doing it to non-white people. It is people in power doing it to people without power. So last 3 comments and then we'll wrap up.
I am against racism in all ways, and I believe injustice is caused. And honestly, when people of my race that are racist, I don't even get why. I try to think why, and I still don't get it. I mean, even if I went to a rally, which I never would, but even if I did, I don't think I would understand why they're racist. It just doesn't make sense to me why they would be. I can't find, I'm serious, I'm white, and I can't find a reason. There's just no reason why you'd be racist towards black. And I understand why some blacks are racist towards whites. It makes sense. However, racism still exists then, because a lot of people would say that I'm a racist or, and stuff like that, but that's not true. I'm not a racist. I've never been a racist, and I never will be. And sometimes I understand why they feel that way, but it is still racism when they label me a racist or label me a bad person and stuff like that, when I wish to not do any of those things and in fact want to benefit them.
Well, within his argument, he completed the counter argument. It's like racism is racism, whether it's white to black or black to white or brown to white or red to black or whatever it is. Racism is abhorrent, and we need to get rid of it. Well, we need to see each other as as humans. Period. That's it.
Right.
Whether
see each other.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say,
first of all.
I was just going to say, see each other as individuals, and we kind of addressed this earlier with this whole collectivist idea. The reason why a racist ideology breaks down, just as a matter of logic, take the morality out of it for a second and the fact that it's just wrong, but just think about it logically, is the reason why racism is wrong is because it collectivizes individuals. And it arbitrarily categorizes them by the color of their skin and says, every person who is of this skin color does this, acts this way, thinks this way. And the point we were making to King earlier is that we can provide you with, black individuals who see the power dynamic that we're describing. We don't belong in the same racial category as them, but we see the world the same way in that respect. And so racism falls apart because you start to say, well, I can point out a member of this group who doesn't think that way or doesn't do that or does, and so that's why the whole thing falls apart just as a matter of logic. And to your point, Nick, that's why it doesn't make any sense.
And it's a very archaic way of viewing the world. And when you see somebody that is truly racist, you need to, I don't know, feel sorry for them in a way, because that's all they have to hold on to, is that they're not intellectually having the acuity to see an individual for an individual, not as a member of this tribe or that, and try to educate them that not every member of this particular hue of skin believes that way, and move forward. Like, I'm human first. Let's start with being human, and then we'll work forward. If you have to resort back to racism, you're intellectually shunted, and we need to try to help those people. Right. So 2 more from Swan, and then I do want to play one that just came in from Jabari because he's returning from last week. Mr. Morris, welcome back. Sorry you just caught us at the tail end of the show. We go from 7 to 8:30 at the latest, but we will play your comment and respond to close out. Here we go.
That seems reasonable. I can agree with that.
Nice, brother.
And I think Mr. Burris was referring to the kind of private business, public entity kind of analogy that we drew earlier.
Well put.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good
and Mr. Morris to close out the show. By the way, Swan, thank you for stopping by. Again, for anybody who's just now catching the show here towards the end, we are Dane and David from the Weapons of Meme Destruction podcast. Can be found at WMDpodcast.com. We have 39 episodes, and plus we upload these episodes to our YouTube channel, so you can catch last week's episode 38, and you'll be able to catch this on YouTube later this week.
If we want to get rid of all this ism stuff, we just need to learn to love people. That's the big problem. And here in this country, this society, this system of things, there's just no love. If people learn to love, we won't care about ism so much, because we want to see people like that.
Shit! Is there a better way to end this than that?
I don't think so. I think
Morris with the cherry on top. Can we? We need an interview with that boy on the podcast.
I would love to at some point in the very near future. Thank you again for stopping by, Jabari. Your comments were enlightening and productive last week, and this comment to close out the show this week was as well. So thank you for that. Thank you for everybody who listened, and we hope to see you next week, next Wednesday, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. We try to do these in an hour, but the last 2 weeks we've been gone an hour and a half. But 8:30 is our hard cutoff. So, but thanks for stopping by, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thanks so much, guys. Peace.